I am a writer. Part of the advantage of being the age I am is I have seen times when it's been worse, or I've seen times that it's been better. It goes back and forth. There's so many displaced people in the world. I mean, there's millions of them. And and you think about it, how can you handle that? To be perfectly honest, I have put more money into the publishing than I have taken out of it.
Hi Marcia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, just recovering up from some sickness, but thank you so much for joining us today on We Are Mentally United podcast. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know we met up at a local church over here in Denver, and just hearing about your story at that time was really inspiring for me.
Well, thank you.
Of course. For folks who might not know of you or about your work, can you briefly give a description around the work that you're doing within the community and the profession that you're in?
Well, I am a writer and I have a series of books for kids who are in fourth through sixth grade, I like to say. A third grader could read it if they were, so inclined, but generally I think it's fourth through sixth graders. And the purpose of the books are to give kids a different look at places that maybe they haven't been, as well as to connect them to ideas or projects that maybe they would like to be involved in. And finally, to inspire them that they too can make the world a better place, that they can make a difference. And I got involved with this somewhat oh, when I was working as a youth volunteer at my church, and I had seventh grade boys in a Sunday school class who did not really want to listen to me, but they loved to play basketball. And somebody sent me a flyer that was about an organization at the time. It was called Nothing But Nets. And it was started by a sports writer named Rick Riley, who had gone to Africa and learned about malaria, but had learned about it sort of in a backhanded way. He had kids that played soccer with these African kids, and when they got home, they sent them all sorts of nets and equipment because the kids had nothing. And then he found out about malaria, and he found out about how people were dying something like one child every 30 seconds. And
Wow.
he was encouraging and he was challenging his group, his readers, to fund a campaign where they would buy these nets. And I had these boys that didn't want to listen to me, but they loved to play basketball. So I challenged them to do that. And at the time, I was sort of messing around with writing a book for kids where the protagonist was a fifth grade girl. And I decided, well, I'll kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. I will engage these boys in a cause that I think is worthwhile, that will be fun. And I'll try to write a story about a girl who learns about malaria and becomes an organizer of a 5K. So that was the first book in the series, called Mosquito Madness. So it,
Oh.
it was a little bit like, oh, I could make this work.
That's really really creative because I see where you're coming up from with these younger kids who really don't listen because I'm a therapist and I see that every day at my practice with a lot of kids struggling with either emotional dysregulation, anger struggles, just being defined in their own ways, but then they also have these different outlets like either sports, music, arts and crafts, in which when they're doing those kinds of activities they are completely immersed in it. And that's how I also work with them, is try using up those outlets as a resource or as an anchor to help them overcome with the struggles that they might be going through, so to redirect them and to help them find their inspirations that through their passions. That's really creative. And um, was there something in your own earlier life journey that inspired this vision?
I don't know that I viewed it early as, oh, I'm going to go help the world. I've always read books from, the time I was probably a first grader. I was reading books. So reading for me just has always come very naturally. And I grew up in southeastern South Dakota on a farm, and it took me places that I couldn't go anywhere else and
Mm-hmm.
adventures that I didn't have on the farm. So it was always a good escape for me. I think I just sort of felt that reading was more entertainment than necessarily social action, at least as a kid that age. But then
Mm-hmm.
like you're alluding to, I saw it could be an inspiration. It could be something that someone could say, hey, I want to use my talent as a basketball player and raise money for a cause, or I want to play an instrument and, show my talent at a fundraiser.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I also feel like the cause that you're working for, that's really, really, really important in today's time and age because malaria, a lot of people, a lot of folks, especially living in the United States, feel like it's not a commonality, but in a lot of different countries, a lot of Asian countries, African countries, it's a big struggle up over there.
Well, when we did our first fundraiser up at my church, it was a 24-hour basketball marathon. And one of the adults who was helping with it, she sat down and she was working at the time in a lab in a university. And there were a lot of foreign exchange workers, students working in this same lab. And she wore our shirt that day to work, and it said buzzkill. And the workers were curious about it and said, what does this mean? And she told them what we were doing. And one of them said something to the effect of, I didn't think Americans cared.
Mm-hmm.
And that hit me harder than almost anything in terms of like, I want people to know we care. I want to
Mm-hmm.
care. I want to make a difference. And at the time, a mosquito net cost something like $10. And the group of kids that I was working with, I think we raised something like $3,000. We
Wow.
had one kid whose uncle was a physician in another state, and he pledged that he would pay $100 per consecutive free throw that this person would make, this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And Davis, the name of the kid, made 15 baskets in a row. So he alone raised
$1,500.
$1,500 for the cause.
Wow. That's really really inspiring, and it must be so empowering for these young folks too.
I think it is. I think it shows that they can make a difference, and it shows that even a simple act of, playing basketball one night
Mm-hmm.
could make a difference. Plus, they learned about the condition that wasn't Denver, Colorado. They learned about what people were going through and the hardships, and maybe developed some empathy, which I think is a worthwhile thing to develop these days.
100%. I feel like empathy is super important, and especially aside from empathy, also community connections are really important. I personally, as a therapist, I feel like one of the major struggles why everyone is going through, not just in the US but around the world, with mental health challenges, is due to lack of communities. Because societies are becoming much and more and more individualistic, and we are distancing ourselves away from communities. But connecting with communities, getting involved in community events or projects, or as you did in terms of an amazing fundraiser, it really empowers you and it really provides you with a lot of satisfaction within as well. And that then changes up, or that plays an effect in your own mental well being because you can see a light in terms of just helping people out, supporting people out in whatever way that we can.
Yeah.
Has this always been a thing that when you were a kid, becoming an author was something that you always wanted to be, or was it just luck and destiny that led you here?
Well, when I was very young, I wanted to be a horse racing jockey, and then I got too tall. And then at one point, I thought I wanted to be president, and I still think I could be president, but I'm not going to run for office at this point. Thank you. So being involved in writing, like I said earlier, I believe it was a bit of an escape, and you can create your own world, and you can have your ability to say what you're thinking through your characters.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been pretty high on my list of things to do for quite some time. But I was in business, corporate world for 16 years before I did this.
How was that like?
Well, I was fairly good at it, and I don't know why, because I never understood why a balance sheet balanced. But I had supervisory experience. I probably have a talent of asking questions. My mother thought I was way too curious, that I would ask too many questions of people, even people I didn't know. So I think asking questions and maybe looking at something differently than the average person, the average business major might look at, probably made a difference.
Very good. Now, asking questions is super important. That I feel like
Mhm.
that's something, especially in today's time and age, should be encouraged a lot for the younger audience because asking questions means that you're curious and having the curiosity for different things. It leads to growth. It leads to evolving because you're just not stuck wherever you are. You're always trying to learn more, get more, and evolve more. And in terms of writing a books, was did that come up as a challenge when you were writing your first book?
Well, the first couple of books that I tried to write were geared more towards adults. And I think I was, in a way, telling my own story. The first book in this series for kids, I don't think it seemed too bad. I used some, shall we say, characters that I dealt with either as my own childhood or others. One of the things that I enjoyed doing was feeling like I was a puppet master, and I could make these kids do what they wanted to do, and I could make the villain girl get her uh, reward, so to speak, or I could make her be the butt of a joke type thing if I wanted to. And so that was fun. The later books in the series, the second one dealt with more research because the protagonist, the main character, is traveling, and she goes to North Platte, Nebraska, oddly enough. And I had to learn a little bit about the canteen that they ran during World War II for soldiers going through. But it was still based around a common thread that I had growing up in the Midwest, which was in small communities, people often help each other out. It's just natural that if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's house burns down, the community is there to help them rebuild. Or if a farmer can't get his crop in because he's had a heart attack, somebody comes along and helps them. So that was a little bit the premise of the second book, showing community work. The fourth book that I'm working on right now has probably been the biggest challenge because I am pulling in Native American, indigenous people into the story, and I want to represent them appropriately, correctly, and not make it a real deep conversation with facts and history, but to make it so that their story is being told. And that's proving to be more of a challenge because I'm not a Native American. And you get into a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of, well, do I have any right to be telling this story?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've sort of had to weigh a little bit. Am I doing this right? Am I uh, saying things that will make sense not only to the white reader but to a Native American reader? And I've had two women review it who are indigenous women, so that I'm getting the story down the way it should be told.
Wow, wow.
But it makes me
That's
nervous too. So,
no, understandably, understandably, because again, we want to share those stories, but we haven't walked in those shoes. So
Exactly.
it's always a challenge. But it's really admirable how you are reaching out to the communities and putting in an effort to make sure that the story is genuine and the characters are genuine or their backstories are genuine. Because a lot of time I feel like, especially in movies or TV shows, also aside from books, it gets neglected, and not the right depiction of people's past and history is shown in a lot of those things. So it's really admirable that you are doing that. I also really like how you're bringing up the community elements of different things, and how there are so many different people around in the world, not just in the US. And sometimes when we are hearing up stories on the internet or on the TV, it's very much divided in today's time and age. But we still have such inspiring stories within the community that need to be highlighted or that need to be put out. Um, do you ever come across double questioning yourself when you're writing up these when you're coming up with the ideas for characters in terms of which direction you want to go with them
Every
with?
other day.
Yeah. And what how do you overcome those things? Like, how do you like reach that point that, okay, I want to go in this direction now?
Um, Sometimes I use the opinion of others, and sometimes I try to think to myself, is this a story that is really important to tell, or is this aspect, critical to the story?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just go with my gut, that I have to say, okay, for whatever reason, my soul is telling me to go this route.
Trusting your instincts
Yeah,
and
that's a
intuition.
better way.
Very good. That's really nice. And throughout this process, do you come across creative blocks or brain fog in terms of when you're writing down, you don't know what the next page would be or what the next chapter would be about?
Quite often, what happens is I have these gaps. This is maybe not what is recommended, but I'm trying to work on two of the stories at the same time so that when they come out, they're in sync. And in one story in particular, I know what happens here and I know what happens here. It's getting them there that I don't know how to get them there. I call it the messy middle.
Wow, yeah, yeah. No, even as a video production person, sometimes when I'm coming up with documentary ideas or editing a video that we have made up, sometimes it's like it's just not the right time to work on that thing. I feel like, because the alignment just doesn't feel right, and even how hard you think about it, it gets much more frustrating in situations. So for me personally, I try going out for a walk, or I
Yeah.
try going out for a jog and then just thinking about it while I do so, with a clearer mind rather than just sitting up in my space. And that's one thing that I always ask authors in terms of their creative process. Um, do you have a creative place where you sit down and write, or can you pick up your journal and start writing anywhere and everywhere?
I probably go back and forth. We're in my office right now, and that sometimes is maybe a better place for me to write. But a lot of times I'm at my dining room table, and it's sort
Mm-hmm.
of the center of the house. If my husband is coming through, I can, tell him what I'm doing, or I can ask him to do something, or, if the dog needs to be let out, I can let the dog out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't typically feel the need to like go to a coffee shop and write. I do use time, like when I'm walking or when I'm doing household type chores, that I will think about that scene that I'm trying to write, and I'll try to picture in my mind what is going to happen in it. So I use quite a bit of time outside at the computer just to think about it and sort of go
Mm-hmm.
like, what's going to happen next? How do I make it happen?
Nice, nice. And how's the creative process of creating up these characters that you create up? Is that something that you observe from the world around you, or does that come very much naturally to you in terms of, this is something I want to talk about, or this is what my character would look like?
Hmm. They seemed like they sort of developed naturally. Unlike my childhood, the characters are more diverse. We have one character who is a foster child. We have one character whose parents are going through a divorce. Uh, and the girl has just found out that her dad is gay. We have a character who is originally from India. It's set in a college town, Iowa City, so I feel like I can have these diverse characters. And I wasn't really intending to make this a series, but some of these characters became very interesting to me in the first book that I wanted to tell more of their stories and I wanted to do more with them. So that, in a way, is, I guess, the development of these characters that I feel like, oh, they have a story to tell as well.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really really nice. You also haven't. You also are managing a book club. Can you share a little bit more about it? What's it called? What is it about?
Well, the book club is called Making a Difference. So the acronym is the MAD book club because I think sometimes we get mad and we don't use that energy in a positive way. So I'm hoping that my characters, who almost always have some kind of something that they get angry about, might show the reader that they could make a difference. And generally speaking, the characters have worked together on a project or something. So I think I'm trying to show that by working with others, you can maybe get more done than just trying to work by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So the Making a Difference book club sort of spun off from during COVID. I did some Zoom book discussions and I thought, well, okay, COVID's over. We'll go on to something else. But then I got thinking a little bit about that Zoom would offer me the chance to reach more kids in more places, maybe even bring some kids together from a different place, like somebody who lives on a farm in South Dakota might find out something about somebody who lives in LA, and it
Mm-hmm.
might bring kids differently. So I am really just in somewhat of the beginning stages of the Making a Difference book club. And what I'm hoping to do is I've worked on a study guide for 4 session discussion questions. And I'm hoping that people will, get a group together, or it could be even a class. And I will show up at least once so that they can meet the author and find out, what I'm like or what questions they might have for me. And I'm hoping that it will maybe inspire them. When I met with a class one time back in Nebraska, one of the kids spoke about how he had raised money for a sister or a brother that had cancer and that he had done a fundraiser. So it's not limited to fighting malaria, but
Mm-hmm.
it could be like a cause to help somebody whose house burnt down, or it could
Mm-hmm.
be given to a cause to help people, maybe children in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
I've been involved with the International Rescue Committee as well, and to work with people who don't think the same way you do, look the same way you do, but we're all connected. And I'm hoping that maybe my books can show that we are similar as much as we are different.
That's so beautiful. My gosh. That is really, really, really beautiful. And again, thank you so much for all this amazing work that you're doing. It's really inspiring. In terms of the book club, what's the age group that you're targeting?
I think I would again shoot for fourth through sixth grade. I think third grade might not have the attention to be on a Zoom call or a Zoom discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I would probably leave it up to whoever is trying to organize it. And again, I could see it being a Sunday school class. I could see it being a Girl Scout troop,
Mm-hmm.
or the fifth grade class if they wanted to do it as a after school activity.
Yeah, no, I think if you present it to schools, that they'd be fully on board with this because they need projects like these from the community members, and again, just highlighting and building up a community for these young folks would be really not just empowering for the kids, but also really helpful for the schools in a lot of different ways. You coined the term booklanthropy to describe your unique approach towards writing. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I like to make up things, and so I believe I made up the word booklanthropy. I don't know that I trademarked it, but it's the name of my, I'm self-published, so it's the name of my publishing company. And the concept behind it is I borrowed a little bit from Paul Newman, who might be too old for you, but he developed a salad dressing, and out of the proceeds of that, X amount of profit went to a cause. And so Mosquito Madness, the first book in the series, went to the group that I referenced earlier, Nothing But Nets, which is now called United to Beat Malaria. And so for every book that I sell, a small amount of it goes to that group to help them do their work.
Mm-hmm.
The second group, I've done it between dealing with homeless veterans as well as just dealing with veterans because there was a large um, emphasis on the work that World War II veterans did. And the
Mm-hmm.
third book, which is Postcards from Hollywood, again dealt with homeless. So I try to pick a cause that the kids will get, that my characters get involved with somewhat, and then say out of the profits I make, some amount of money will go to this cause.
Oh, wow. One thing that I have noticed as Mentally United also works with different causes is that sometimes when you hear stories from individuals who are struggling for the cause that you're working for, it leads to a lot of compassion burnout sometimes because in some
Yeah.
ways we are looking up at our own privileges that we have, and then we are looking up at the community that we are trying to serve. Do you come across those challenges too when you hear these stories from either veterans or from homeless folks or from like people struggling with malaria?
Not so much because with malaria at least, it has felt like it was at a distance. What I think is hitting me now in the book that I'm working on, there is a refugee. And because of my work with the International Rescue Committee, there is so much upheaval with that process right now. And you see the news and you hear about what is going on in Gaza, or you hear about the areas where a family that I know, they were in a refugee camp for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of overwhelming in that there's so many displaced people in the world. I mean, there's millions of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it, how can you handle that? Well, sometimes you have to give yourself a break. And other times, what I've done in this particular case where I've been working with this refugee person, this family, I have told myself, okay, I didn't find them a job, or we're still looking for classes for them to learn English, but this has to be better than being in a refugee camp,
Mm-hmm.
being here. And I am I am hoping that people, when this book gets finished, that they will have more empathy for people that weren't lucky enough to be born in the United States,
No,
that
definitely.
people who are starving, or people that live in danger of drug lords, or people that live in areas that, their homes have been destroyed by nature,
Mm-hmm.
that we are so lucky and we have so much that we could share.
100%, 100%. I feel like sometimes within the US community, people are living in their small bubbles and they
Yeah.
don't really know what's happening outside of their own bubble. And just highlighting stories like these just opens up doors towards have being grateful at the end of the day for the things that we have, because as you said, there are people all across the world, whether that be in Gaza, whether that be in Southern America, whether that be in Africa, any part of the world, or Asia. There's a lot of pain up over there. There's a lot of struggle over there, financial. Some countries don't even have regular bathrooms that people can go and use, or hygienic bathrooms. And just reading about them or just watching documentaries about them, it's just opens up so many doors of self-compassion, so many doors of just being grateful for where we are.
Well, and it has been a rough, I'd say 4 years or 5 years, however long since the pandemic. And I know that in the case of fighting malaria, they had made better strides, but then because of government shutdowns or because of complications with COVID, the rate of malaria went back up again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't have just malaria. You have, what you were talking about, poor water conditions or kids dying of polio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've seen that so much because I'm originally from Pakistan,
Oh,
and um, I've seen it within our own country as well. Because I was lucky enough to be born in a major city. I was born in Karachi. However, we would always hear stories around people just not having clean water that led to dengue, that led to malaria, that led to other diseases as well, because they just don't even have clean drinking water or clean washing water, and a lot of diseases get born from that, are very much waterborne.
yeah. And in a sad way, I think what my books do is teach a little science or teach a little history or teach a little social studies
Mm-hmm.
of how these things grow in other countries or how these things develop,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the violence in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There definitely is, and that's always been there, the violence in the world. I feel like even if the countries were not at, even if the US was not at war with any other country, there are different countries that are constantly or having fights, or there are tribal wars that are constantly happening in different parts of the world that we don't even know about. Like being in you're really informed, I'm really informed, but I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of tribal wars that we still don't know
Oh,
about, that are happening around.
and the I told you I'm working on two books at one time. The one book deals with the history of my original state, South Dakota. And as a child, I did not know about Wounded Knee, where a huge massacre
Mm-hmm.
occurred when soldiers killed, I think, something like 200 people, women, children. And it's like, this happened in my own state. Yeah, it happened 100 years before I was born, but still, it was a big situation and it still affects people.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what sometimes boggles me, that we are in 2025, we have advanced so much as a community, as people, as individuals, and yet there are fights going on for little to no reason, where this earth is full of abundance, it's full of resources, it's full of natural resources that we can tap into, and there is so much that we could do if we come united, if we unite together. But for some reason in 2025 we are still living up with these wars that's happening in Russia, that's happening in at Gaza, and then also some wars that we don't even know about happening in different smaller countries that we don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
And it just like does not make sense, because it feels, at one point it feels like we have evolved so much, uh, but at the same time it feels like there is so much more work that we need to do as a community.
And I think for younger people, they're growing up thinking that this is the way it has to be, or this is the way it's always been. And part of the advantage of being the age I am is I have seen times when it's been worse, or I've seen times that it's been better. It goes back and forth. And
Mm-hmm.
so I hope that my books give kids a sense of there are things you can do to make this better. There are things that will come out of this that will maybe make us stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that we will regret that came out of it.
No, that's really true. One thing that I wanted to also touch upon is how difficult was transitioning from your your background in journalism and business towards being a writer. How difficult was that transition like?
The one positive thing about being in business or when I was working for corporate America, I always got a paycheck. I always got paid for what I did or the time that I put into it, and I had something to show for those, 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And being a writer, um, you don't always have that. I mean, you might be at your computer 10 hours and you go, huh, half a page here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not even a good half page.
Mm-hmm.
Being a journalist, I think, again, fulfilled my ability to have the authority to ask people questions, to
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, what are you thinking about? What are you doing? How might I resolve this? I mean, the questions might be questions I was asking my characters. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the journalism background, again, fulfilled my curiosity. It gave me sort of the creativity to say, oh, I could have them go off in this direction and try to solve the problem, or I could have them go this direction and try to solve another problem. So um, the business, again, probably gave me more, I wouldn't say instant gratification, but it had something to show for the work that I put in, and the writing can really drag out for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of struggles that the creative people go through is that if they get stuck in that 9 to 5 or business culture, it becomes really difficult to break out from it because, as you said, you have a salary that's coming in, and on the other hand, it becomes a little bit risky in terms whether that be writing, whether that be video work, whether that be art work
Yeah.
or graphics works. There is always a hesitancy in terms of leaving up those full-time job. How difficult was that for you in terms of that? Did you think for a long time about jumping into this profession, or was that like
I
an instant?
talked about it for a long time, and I am of a frugal nature, so we had saved money quite a bit, but we had two young children when started this, and then I started doing a lot of part-time work. So I would fill it with, the first part-time job I had was delivering the newspaper at, 5 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us some income. And I think I thought, oh, if I don't do it now, when will I do it? And
Mm-hmm.
my husband was very supportive of it. Um, and so it seemed like it worked out for us all right. But, we had saved quite a bit. I had been paid well when I was working for corporate America. So, I had paid quite a bit of the mortgage off and things like that. So I guess in a way I had planned my
That's good.
escape, so to speak,
That's good. And just having support around you with family, that also goes a long way.
for sure.
Yep. And in terms of your background as a journalist, how much of that plays a role in you being an author? In terms of when you write, is there any commonalities that come across with it?
Um, the journalist background that I had was more, um, or I should say, was less descriptive and, was more stick to the facts and don't give, he is thinking about this or he is, feeling this. You, as a journalist, you don't know exactly what the person is thinking or feeling, but the writing allows me to be subjective. The journalist background made me comfortable with writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope gave me the techniques of, okay, you need a comma here, or you need a question mark and quotes and the mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Uh, and you mentioned about being self-publishing author. How interesting? How is that like?
Oh, to be perfectly honest, I have put more money into the publishing than I have taken out of it. So I jokingly say something like, some people go on cruises or they refinish their bathroom. I write books. So so it's my expensive hobby.
That's a really good mindset to have. Really, really good mindset to have.
Well, again,
Because
I've gotten to the point of, my kids are grown and on their own. I can afford this.
yeah, and you're enjoying it. That's the
Yeah.
most important thing. It's something that you're passionate about, something that comes naturally to you, and something that you enjoy, which is really important to be doing throughout your life. In terms of your own either younger early childhood or when you were a teenager, did you go through any struggles or wellness challenges that you had to overcome?
Not major ones compared to, I think, my characters or to, people that my friends have gone through more. I mentioned earlier, I grew up on a farm. I don't think we felt we were wealthy, but we never struggled for food. And all five children went off to college, and we had
Mm-hmm.
ponies that we could ride. So it seemed like it was a good life that way. Um, I think the st biggest struggle I probably had growing up, and I think this is typical for a lot of kids, is feeling like I am just so different than everybody else. No one
Mm-hmm.
really thinks the way I think, or no one wants to do what I want to do. I was not, I wouldn't say I was a nerd, and I was always, shall we say, confident in a way, but I felt a bit of a loner. And
Mm-hmm.
I think at times that's a strength, because you look at things maybe objectively, sort of going like, having all those clothes really doesn't make, you a better person. But on the other hand, you can still feel sort of like, oh, do I want to have anybody over because my house isn't as nice as that person's house? You're comparing yourself too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, I got good grades, and that wasn't always viewed as being a positive thing in my circle with friends or kids in my class. They would sort of tease you for being teacher's pet, or, being, I think there was a term called schoolgirl, and that, I didn't go to many parties when I was a high school student where there might be alcohol, because my parents wouldn't have liked that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but compared to maybe what my kids went through or what their friends went through, I probably had what someone once told me was a charmed life.
Okay, okay. And I still feel like going through those little bits of differences with when we are young, it plays when we get through it, it does not feel like a big deal. But when we are but when we are living those moments, it does feel like a big deal.
Yeah.
Because time has changed and evolved a lot. But what you just mentioned about questioning different things, feeling like nobody understands us, or very less people understand us, or is there something wrong within us? That's something that kids, even in today's time and age, go through at schools, at home, because I always hear in my sessions that Mr. Z, no one understands me. Mr. Z, I don't think my parents see things the way I see. And I feel like that's a struggle that we all go through in different stages of life, and we do overcome those struggles that builds us up into a person that we become in the future. But when you're going through it, it's difficult.
And I think the kids of today have so many more comparisons that they can make to kids on social media.
Mm-hmm.
or, a wider variety of kids that are coming through their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the kids I knew their parents. Their parents knew my parents, that type of thing. It was a much smaller, closer community. I remember somebody once telling my mom, well, that's the way the boys always talk in your family. That they had a bit of a speech impediment. And it was just something that because she knew the family, she said, well, this is a tradition in your family.
Mm-hmm.
And today I don't know that we have that connection. I've seen or heard kids talk about somebody, maybe their dad losing a job, and nobody knows about it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I meant, like in the beginning too, that we are becoming much more individualistic with as a family, and less, or as individuals, and less connected to our neighbors, to people around us, to
Yeah.
people who go to the same church or the same activity that the kids might go through. Like, people really don't know about it, and that has caused a lot of issues and a lot of mental health struggles that people go through today. um, and just comparing and contrasting things in today's time and age, it could be really heavy, because kids are looking at other kids who have the latest of cell phones or virtual reality games or playstations, or, oh, this friend has a phone, I want to have a phone, kind of comparisons. And I don't know. It's I just feel like it's really difficult for the younger generations today, because there are just so many resources and things that define your life. Whereas when we were growing up, or when I grew up in the 90s, phones were a luxury thing. Technology was more of a luxury tool. Uh, the main tool was that, oh, I want to go outside and play because X, Y, and Z is playing outside. It wasn't like, I want to have this car, or you should buy this car because my friend's dad has this car. So it's just changed so much, and I feel like the younger generation has a lot of these exterior struggles that they go through.
I agree.
You've written for both children and adults, and I'm pretty sure that it requires different approaches. How do you adjust your writing style depending on the audience?
Well, the first book that I published, and it's only an ebook, um, dealt with a fairly serious subject, where a a couple had the husband had an extramarital affair, and the punchline, or the premise, was sort of like, how do you forgive somebody?
Mm-hmm.
And so the subject area itself was not something that would necessarily work well with, um, kids writing, or I don't know. I think I felt it was too mature for them. And in a way, it came about because a couple that I was friends with, went through that. And I remember the woman saying something like, well, I'm taking him back, but I will never forgive him. And they
Mm-hmm.
subsequently divorced. And in a way, it was puzzling to me, because I thought, well, if you're feeling that way, how would that ever be resolved? So it was sort of maybe a way for me to ponder, how does one forgive?
Mm-hmm.
And the other book, which is a collection of Christmas stories, started somewhat because I was in a writers group for a few years, small group of people, and every Christmas we wrote Christmas stories. So I had about four or five of them, and they were quite a ways from your traditional Hallmark Christmas stories. So that wasn't that hard to do. I mean, and that was just sort of, again, I'm going to tell this story about a girl who wants to be a dancer,
Mm-hmm.
and what she was wanting to do. And I'm going to tell another story about a boy who is coming back home after having run away.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was sort of easy in a way, because a short story can only be so long,
Mm-hmm.
and I only really had to write one or two scenes in it.
Nice. One
So
thing that
I don't know if that answered your question.
no, it definitely did. And one of the things I noticed that whether you're writing it for children or adults, there is a commonality of empowering your characters or your characters going through an empowerment journey where they become independent or they become empowered. Am I getting it correct?
I hope so. I hope that the stories have a happy ending.
Have you ever written a sad ending story, a sad ending book?
Only the ones that haven't gotten finished.
Well, that's good. That's good because I guess in the end, everything becomes okay. Things work out for us, and we have to believe in that journey and just continue moving forward. Because some days I feel like life is just like seasons. There are gonna be some seasons that are gonna be difficult, and you just have to sit through it and embrace through it. And then there are gonna be some seasons when things are just gonna be absolutely beautiful, and you'd be given abundance. And it's never linear. It's always up and down like a wave.
And the amazing thing is sometimes you have to have enough space from that season to realize how good it was
Mm-hmm.
or how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
That at the time you don't really see it, the perspective to say, oh, that was okay.
Yeah,
Or, boy, I was really strong to get through that.
exactly. Acknowledging it in the future when you reflect back on things, it's really important. I've been through myself my fair share of challenges, and when I'm going through it, it feels like it's impossible and it's the end of the world. But then I constantly keep reminding myself of my own resilience and push through it. And then 6 months later, a year later, a few months later, I look back at it and I'm like, wow, I really handled it well. Like,
Maybe you have to write a book.
I am planning to write a book actually, and that's why I keep asking people about their creative processes because for me, I'm more of a production person, video person, filming person. I enjoy more of that. Writing element comes a little difficult to me, but there are a lot of things that I have to write about, and I know that I will in the future. What do you do for your own well-being? What are some of the activities you're involved in? We live in Colorado. It's filled with mountains. Do you go on hikes and stuff?
Not as many as we should. I do like the fall in hiking in the Aspen. Uh, I'm in several reading groups. I'm again a volunteer, quite active. I'm in a leadership role with the United Women in Faith, not only in my church but the district.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I enjoy doing projects and I enjoy doing things that other people haven't ever done before, or maybe I have a bit of a rebel in me that if it's something that they say, oh, that's sort of a crazy idea, I sort of relish doing crazy ideas. I like to go out to eat. I have two daughters in California, so and now a grandson in California, so I think I will be going to California more. And
Nice.
have part ownership of a farm in South Dakota, so I do some work with that, and I have sisters and a brother that I like connecting with. So
Oh,
I like talking to people if you haven't figured that out.
I can see that. I can see talking to people, traveling, and also having your hands in so many different projects. Like, that sounds like a lot of work. How do you balance all of these things together, and how do you manage your time?
Sometimes I don't do it very well. Sometimes, sometimes I need somebody to sort of say, "Hey, I'll take that over for you," and they'll step up. And sometimes, it's an afternoon with a book instead of an afternoon with the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do probably every day at least a mile walk because I have a dog that needs to go out and walk, and she's getting older, so we don't walk as far. But being in Colorado, generally the weather is beautiful at least sometime during the week.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It definitely is. Like today, it's a beautiful weather outside, but just a couple of weeks ago, it was snowing outside. So it
Yeah.
always comes and goes in different waves. But it's really important to value the work that you do at the end of the day, and also do things for your own well-being that keeps you refreshed. And I think walk is one of those things for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and are you more of a structured person that, like, in terms of writing down points and things that and your commitments that you have to spend time on, or is it more of an organic process that comes along?
Um, I am fairly good when I'm talking about some of the extra activity work that I surround myself with people who are very organized and who keep me organized. When I am writing, I will have like an outline of sorts saying this happens and then this happens and then this happens. Um, what I mentioned earlier is that part of getting from point A to point B is not always a clear roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be getting a section written may end up having a lapse time of, several weeks and it's only 3 pages, but
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to figure out what makes sense for my characters to do to move from this point to that point.
Yes.
So I think I'm structured in the sense of I have an idea of what I want to say. I'm not always structured in balancing the various things that I have going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
that I
how?
don't necessarily say, oh, this day is just going to be a writing day, or this day is just going to be a take care of business day,
Okay. So it's very much organic, like whatever you feel
I
into
guess.
in the moment. Nice, nice. And how have you seen your own self evolve and grow as an author from the first book that you wrote to now, where when you're working on two books that are going to be published in the future?
I think, in a way, and I'm sort of proud of this, that I think I'm willing to take more chances. And I'm thinking I'm willing to be different than what, somebody might think a an author for a fourth through sixth grade audience is. And in a way, I think I'm having more fun with it.
That's cool. I think that's really important. And do you like challenging yourself in these moments when you're writing books, in terms of coming up with characters or coming up with storylines?
I like the challenge, or I enjoy the pleasure that comes up when I come up with, I think, a fresh or a unique way of developing a character. I will
Mm-hmm.
get frustrated again with that messy middle of getting from point A to point B.
I think that's the story of an author.
I think so.
and I
I
think
think
that
so.
and I think that also defines when you come across it, or when you accomplish that middle ground. It just makes it much more impactful and much more rewarding as an author too. But I feel like all of us go through that in some way or the other as creative people. Well, you've been writing for a very long time, and what are some of the advices that you'd like to give to aspiring writers or young writers out there who might have just picked up their pen or their keyboard and might be thinking about writing something?
I think, to be realistic, you can't expect overnight success. You might not even be able to expect success in a decade. I think you maybe have to do sort of you write for yourself, or you write because there's a story that is so important to tell that you would tell it whether you made $1 off the sale of your book or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not able to gear that, then I think you have to balance, the reality of the demands of the world, that you need X amount of money to pay for rent, or you need X amount of money to buy food. you're going to need to balance that with a job that will give you that and write on weekends or write at night or take a vacation and do writing that way. But I think you have to be realistic about how long it might take.
Yeah. I guess having that expectation or that thing, it's really important. I've been thinking about, as I mentioned, about writing up a book, but I thought about this, and but I've been going through a creative block myself, and I was just telling it to someone yesterday that I'm thinking about traveling and then setting up in a park or somewhere in a social setting, and then coming up with ideas and writing about it. So I feel like at the end of the day, as writers or any creative people, we have to be compassionate towards ourselves and think
Yeah,
of things realistically.
yeah.
Um, is there any you gave an advice to the younger folks? Is there anything or any advice that you'd give to your younger self, looking back in time, in terms of things that you might have been stressed about in those moments, and you did overcome those things? But any advice for your own younger self?
I'm still a work in process. Um, and things will change. And maybe I would say look back at situations that you got through and realize that you got through that hard time. You'll get through this hard time.
Well, thank you. No, thank you for sharing that. Because that's something that I also remind myself sometimes to just hang in there. It's gonna
Yeah.
be all okay. Sunshine's gonna come out. Just hang in there. You mentioned about working upon the two books that you're currently working on. What are some of the other future projects that you're working on, and when are you expecting these books to go out, or if you have an idea?
I was talking to the woman who has done a lot of editing for me, and I was telling her my plans, and she said, "Oh, you are nuts." So, so I don't know that I might be certifiable. I am hoping that I will come out with two and possibly three books the latter part, like the third quarter of 2025, because I would like, because I haven't published anything for a while, and I would like to get this series back up and running again. Um, so I'm hoping that occurs. No promises. Don't be sending me pre-orders already. But I'm hoping that would happen. I'm hoping that I will generate enough interest in the Making a Difference book club that I get busy with Zooming every so often with a bunch of my readers and hearing what they have to say. And if it's a group in the Denver metro area, I'm comfortable driving even 150 miles to meet with a group of kids to hear what they thought about my books,
Well,
meet with them. Um, and every so often I get the urge. I have this monstrosity of a book that is set in South Dakota during the Depression. It's an adult book that I'm thinking, when is that one going to get done? And it's about the size of Gone with the Wind, if you remember, if you've ever seen that, about that thick.
beautiful
So
movie.
it's a beautiful movie, but I don't know when that will get done. So I keep out of bars this way.
No, well, I wish you all the best, and I'm pretty sure that it's gonna get done very soon. Excited to read about it, and whenever you launch it, please do share it with us. In terms of reaching out to you, how can people reach out to you? Where can people order your books from? Um,
I'm on Amazon, and people can reach out to me and get a book directly from me if they want a self autographed book, and they can do that at uh, I've got to think, Marcia at Booklanthropy.com.
mm-hmm. All right, and what I'll also do is I'll also share up your links in
Yeah,
the description of the video so that people can find those links
and
up over there as well.
Marcia Canter Author.com.
Mm-hmm.
is where you can find information, and I think you can do it through that as well.
Very nice, very nice. And as I said, like I'll be putting in all the descriptions for folks. So folks, please do look into the description and reach out to Marcia. And also, how can people join the book club if they want to?
Well, I would be putting some information out, hopefully in the next few weeks, if not when this comes live, of how they can do that. Or they can email me and say, Marcia, I have a Girl Scout troop that I would love to have read your book, and we'll work on a badge that's connected to philanthropy. Or if you're a fifth grade teacher and you want to do something with the books, they can write me, and I again can try to facilitate something that would work.
Very good. No, that's really nice. And as I said, all the links would be in the description for those things, folks. And thank you so much, Masha, for joining me for this conversation. It
Well,
was
this has been fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Your journey is really inspiring. The work that you're doing for the community is extremely, extremely, extremely valuable and needed. And I just hope that more people do similar works, because at the end of the day, we have to come together as a community. We are so much better when we are united as compared to when we are divided. So thank you so much for being such a positive ray of inspiration for the folks around us.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing and for connecting us to other people.
Of course, that's the goal of us, and hopefully we can record a part two with you whenever your book's coming out, and we can talk more about that book that you're going to be putting out in the world. But again, thank you for joining me today, and I wish you all the best for all the projects that you're working on.
Thanks again.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.